So this is a really interesting mouthpiece. I mean, people see these things around occasionally, rarely. A double ring, WT facing. Just rarely we see them. Sometimes you can find one online, and usually they've been opened to 100 or 105 or 110 or some sort of perverse tip opening. The reason I say that is because these pieces, the WT facing is specific. It's a short curve with particular stations that makes it play a particular way. And people usually, and they tend to have actually a particular type of baffle as well. Um, but people usually think this is pretty arbitrary WT, and they just think, well, it's just a small mouthpiece that needs to be opened up. But the truth is, so the WT facing mouthpieces are about 85. They're about 85 thousandths of an inch tip size. And that's not very big, and they normally wouldn't have, a huge, thick piece of metal on the tip. They were finished to be this size because back in the day, that this is essentially a 5-star, a Link 5-star. Back in the day, a Link 5-star size would have been considered, that's medium. That's not tiny and not huge. It's pretty well medium. That's what people might normally play back in the 50s. So 5-star 6 was considered pretty big. 7 is just, outrageously big back then. So times have changed. So they made these pieces at 5-star intentionally. It wasn't that they couldn't get them big enough. This was the size that people were playing. So 5-star, that was like an intentional move. So people look at these and they think, well, there's just something small that's got to be opened up. Well, unless the thing is, unless it doesn't play or it's destroyed, I mean, you're actually destroying what it originally was by opening it up. Not to mention, which the thing that people don't understand is that when they see, most of the time, when they see something like a WT Otto Link opened up to 100 or 105 or 110, most of the time, you can't get there. You see how thin that tip is? And I haven't really opened this. I mean, I've opened it, 2 thousandths of an inch or 3 thousandths of an inch. Very small. Not because I wanted to open it, but just because it needed cleanup. So in the process, it gains a little bit of size. But you see that the tip isn't very thick, and I haven't taken hardly anything off of it. And so for example, if I put this on a glass and I just lay it up against a mouthpiece that's open to 100 or even 100, but 105 or whatever, the bottom of the tip rail on that 100 or 105 will actually be over the top of the bite on this mouthpiece. So what I'm telling you is, if people are opening these up to 100 and 105 and 110, they are most likely shortening the mouthpiece to do it, because they're going to run out of metal and they're going to have to cut it back. So they have a thicker piece of metal, and then they move the whole facing back. Everything moves back. And it's actually pretty significant, and it very much does change the way the piece plays. You see, we have this very, very long piece of brass here, which is your baffle and tip underneath, and your bite, in front of your bite plate, you've got this long piece of brass. Well, you'll see a lot of those mouthpieces that are opened up big, and the brass only goes to like here, but people who aren't experienced in seeing them can't tell the difference. They think it's normal. It's not. They had a pretty long piece of brass there. So they've shortened the mouthpiece and really changed the relationship between the chamber and the baffle and the floor and everything. There's a distance here. If you look inside, I mean, you can see there's a chamber back there where it kind of cuts out, and that distance between that chamber and your baffle and your tip is quite important. It's how the piece responds. Now, I can understand if a tip is damaged, it needs to be shortened. I mean, that sometimes we'll do that in when we're just rescuing a mouthpiece. But if a mouthpiece is an original facing, people want to open them up because they can't play that size. They don't know how to work that, or they don't like it. I mean, that's valid too, but I don't know if not liking it is the best reason to, alter a mouthpiece that works well, that's an antique. But that's, who am I to tell people what to do? So In any case, I'm just letting folks know that, a lot of those mouthpieces have been shortened to reach that larger size. And if they haven't been shortened, in some cases the tips have been hammered open, meaning bent. So they bend them up, and that also messes things up too. But not like we don't have a history of mess ups in the mouthpiece scene. So anyway, this is a WT. It's got a short curve. It's at about 0.8087, so 87 thousandths of an inch. And it's just really interesting. So I've done this in the traditional style. These actually had quite a bit of baffle, more than some other links. Although double rings at smaller sizes, they tend to have pretty good sized baffle anyway. But this has quite a significant baffle, which it already had, and I've redone the curve, maintaining as close to the original as I could while cleaning it up, because it was just a little, it's kind of like dinged up on the tip and such. But it's really interesting how these mouthpieces play. The WT, because it has a short curve at 5-star size, doesn't require really hard reeds to go. And these things are designed to go and go loud, go bright. They're like bright, edgy, and loud at a small size with even a fairly soft reed. So that's interesting. So to give you a little example, I put this on my 1960 Mark VI tenor, which is not a ridiculously bright horn. It's really kind of in the middle. It's got a nice projection, but it's I wouldn't say it's dark either, but it's not super edgy. And I've got like a kind of a hardish 2.5, or we could say a softish 3 reed on there. And this reed works on this piece at the moment. And we'll just get an idea of how it goes. It's surprisingly buzzy. This is how this how the old timers like Coltrane and whatever got such a bright sound on small tip mouthpieces. I'm not saying Train used a WT, but he probably didn't. He had his pieces worked on, but he didn't use large sizes. But the WT is sort of epitome of how you get a smaller tip to be bright. So it still sounds like a double ring, but it's aggressive, bright and edgy, and very little work. That's just how it's designed to go. It's got a slightly soft reed, minimal effort, and just blasts out the rasp. And that's the WT thing, more so on double rings than later. Double rings actually have usually more baffle or higher floors, like a little smaller chamber. The Florida double rings, it's just a little more compact and punchy than the early generation of Florida links, the no USA links without the serial numbers. The ones with the serial numbers, they still tend to be a little brighter. They're basically are double rings. But then once the serial numbers drop, that model starts to get a little bit larger chamber. Later it goes to the the USA links, which trend towards bright, but the chamber's still a little larger. So there's a progression. But the double rings tend to be like this focused, buzzy thing, and a WT on a double ring is aggressive.